This story is from a woman named Lisa, who had a very creepy encounter with a mall Santa when she was shopping with her son, Mark. Lisa was a single mother of a 5-year-old boy, and she lived in a house that belonged to her grandparents. It was a quiet neighborhood, mostly populated by elderly people. Lisa loved her son more than anything, and she wanted to give him the best Christmas ever. She took him to the mall one day, and they bought gifts for their family and friends. Mark was very excited, and he wanted to eat at McDonald's. Lisa agreed, and they had a nice meal together. After that, they left the mall through the south exit, where they saw a mall Santa standing outside. He waved at them and greeted them with a jolly voice. He asked Mark what he wanted for Christmas, and Mark said he wanted a Nintendo Switch. Lisa smiled because she had already bought one for him. The Santa winked at Lisa and said, "If you're good, maybe you'll get it." Then he stood up and started to compliment Lisa on her appearance. He said to Mark, "Your mother's a looker, Mark. You know that?" Mark laughed, not knowing what he meant. Lisa felt a bit uncomfortable, but she tried to be polite. They had a small talk with Santa, who said he worked for the mall. Lisa made the mistake of telling him that she was a single mom and that Christmas was stressful for her. She joked that she needed Santa's help. The Santa laughed and said, "Mark, have you ever heard the song, 'I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus'?" Mark nodded, and the Santa leaned in towards Lisa with his cheek. He wanted her to kiss him. Lisa thought it was harmless, and she leaned in to give him a quick peck on the cheek. But as she did, the Santa turned his head and tried to kiss her on the lips. Lisa pulled away, feeling disgusted. The Santa looked at her and laughed in a creepy way. He said, "Merry Christmas," and Lisa grabbed Mark and walked away. She felt violated and angry. She wished she had slapped him or reported him to the mall security. As they drove away, she noticed that Santa was gone. She wondered where he went and if he was following them. She tried to forget about it and focus on Mark. They got home and she locked the door. She put on a Christmas movie for Mark and they cuddled on the couch. She hoped that the night would end well. But it didn't. Her doorbell rang, and she was surprised. She wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late. She told Mark to stay on the couch, and she went to the door. She asked, "Who is it?" And a man's voice said, "It's Santa." Lisa felt a surge of fear. She recognized the voice. It was the mall Santa. She said, "If you're the mall Santa, please go away, or I'm calling the cops." He said, "You dropped something out of your bag, miss. I'm just looking to return it." Lisa said, "What did I drop?" He said, "I don't know, miss. I'm not looking to be nosy. But if you open the door, I can hand it to you." Lisa said, "No, thank you. Please leave now." She decided to call the mall management office and report him. But the man on the phone said that they didn't hire any mall Santas, and that whoever was pretending to be one was doing it on his own. Lisa felt a chill down her spine. She realized that the man outside was not a mall employee, but a stalker. She hung up the phone and ran back to Mark. She told him that they had to leave the house. She grabbed her keys and her phone, and she took Mark by the hand. She opened the door, and she saw him. The mall Santa was standing on her porch. He smiled and said, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas." He lunged at her, and she screamed. Lisa was terrified. She heard a man outside her window shouting "ho, ho, ho" in a mocking voice. She realized it was the mall Santa who had followed her home. She quickly called the police and told them that a man dressed as Santa was stalking her. She told Mark to stay in the living room and watch the movie while she waited for the police to arrive. The police came and searched the area, but they didn't find anyone. They told Lisa that they would patrol the neighborhood and keep an eye on her house. They advised her to lock all the doors and windows and to call them again if she saw or heard anything suspicious. Lisa thanked them and felt a bit safer. She went back to Mark and tried to act normal. She hoped that the mall Santa would leave her alone, but he didn't. A few nights later, Lisa was watching a show in the living room while Mark was sleeping upstairs. She heard the doorbell ring and she felt a surge of fear. She knew it was him. She turned off the TV and ran upstairs to her room, which was connected to Mark's room. She locked the door and grabbed her phone. She didn't hear the doorbell ring again, but she didn't dare to go downstairs. She stayed in her room until the morning. The next day, when she was leaving the house, she saw something that made her sick. There was a note taped to her front door. It was typed and printed. It said, "Dear Lisa, I'll just be blunt. I'm sure you can guess who this is. I didn't mean to scare you the other night. I just had a long shift. And when a pretty lady talks to you after pretending to be Santa for 6 hours, hormones kind of go crazy. You and your son are the cutest things ever. And I'd love to one day be a part of your family. You can't pretend you didn't feel the connection when we spoke the other night. I already know where you live. Now I just need your number. Feel free to shoot me a text whenever, and maybe we can plan something one day. Sorry, I know this may seem creepy or a bit much, but I'm the kind of guy who if I see something I like, I go after it. Anyway, happy holidays if we don't speak soon. Here's my number. Best, Ted." Lisa felt disgusted and angry. She took a picture of the note and called the police again. She gave them the note and the number. She hoped that they would catch him and arrest him. She didn't want to see him or hear from him ever again. The police traced the number and found out that it belonged to a man named Ted Wilson, who had a criminal record of harassment and stalking. They went to his apartment and arrested him. They told Lisa that he would not be contacting her anymore, and that if he did, she should let them know. They also gave her a restraining order against him. Lisa was relieved and grateful. She never heard from that creep again. She assumed that the police scared him off or that he was in jail. She was glad that it was over. She hugged Mark and told him that she loved him. She decided to move to a different house, in a different neighborhood. She wanted to start fresh and forget about the mall Santa. She wanted to have a peaceful and happy Christmas with her son. This happened back in 2020, when me and my fiance moved into this cute little house in a nice neighborhood. We thought it was the perfect place to start a family. But boy, were we wrong. We got to know all of our neighbors pretty well, the ones next to us and the ones across the street. They all seemed cool, but you know how it is. You never really know what kind of messed up stuff people are hiding. Like our neighbor Paul on our right. He was always quiet but polite whenever we talked. He was out and about almost every day, probably going to work or something. I had no idea what he did for a living. Anyway, I hadn't seen him for a few days, and his car was still parked in his driveway. No big deal, right? Maybe he was just taking some time off. He had put up some Christmas lights, which I thought was nice for a single guy in his 40s. I was a bit late with my own Christmas decorations, so I was outside one night, setting them up. That's when I noticed something weird. Paul's Christmas lights started to go crazy. They were flickering like mad all over the place. It looked like something was wrong with the wiring or the electricity. The next day, I went to work around 10. I saw that Paul's car was still there and all his blinds were shut. When I came back from work, nothing had changed. His Christmas lights were on though, so he had to be home. I joked with my fiance that he was probably in hibernation mode. Later that night, my fiance came in and told me to check out Paul's lights. I went outside and saw the same thing as before. They were flickering like crazy, but not in a cool way. It looked like they were having a seizure or something. I thought I should go and tell him, and also see if he was okay. I knocked on his door and rang the bell. All his blinds were still shut and I couldn't see any lights inside. No answer. I rang again. Finally, he opened the door and said hi. I told him about his lights, which had stopped flickering by then. I swore I wasn't lying. He said he didn't know about that, and thanked me. I asked if he was okay, since I hadn't seen him for a while. He said he was just sick. He seemed off. Then I heard something from inside his house. It sounded like a kid screaming for help. Paul didn't have any kids. I wanted to ask him, what was that? But I didn't. I just said bye and walked back to my house. Then I told my fiance to call the cops right now. So I told my fiance, I think Paul has a kid in his house. She was like, what the hell are you talking about? I said, I think Paul snatched a kid. So I called the cops and told them I heard a kid screaming in my neighbor's house. My neighbor who has no kids and hasn't left his house for weeks. I asked them not to tell him it was me who called, but I knew he would figure it out anyway. The cops showed up and busted into his house. When I found out what they saw, I was sick to my stomach. There was a little boy in the basement. He had been trapped there for 4 days. The boy had been taken from another town, and the flickering lights, that was him. He was smart and somehow managed to mess with the Christmas lights to try to get someone's attention. Maybe he saw me or someone else through the basement windows. He must have seen his chance to scream for help when I was at the door. What a brave kid. I'm so happy he got back to his family. I don't know what Paul did to him, and I don't want to know. I hope he can move on and have a normal life. And Paul, he's going to jail for a long time, and he deserves it. It happened when I was a little kid, maybe 6 years old, living in a suburban house with my family. My sister and I loved Christmas more than anything. We had just moved to a new house, and this was our first Christmas there. I still remember this night very clearly because it was so terrifying. It was Christmas Eve, and I couldn't sleep at all. I was too excited for the next morning. I stayed up late in my room, playing a Star Wars game on my old PS1. I turned the volume down low so my mom wouldn't hear me I played until I was too tired to keep my eyes open. Then I got up to go to the bathroom. I sneaked out of my room and went to the bathroom upstairs. I was very quiet because I didn't want to wake anyone up. When I finished, I was heading back to my room. But then I heard a noise downstairs. It sounded like someone was moving the Christmas tree. I thought it might be Santa. I was curious, so I crept down the stairs to see. I reached the bottom of the stairs and peeked into the living room. It was dark, except for a flashlight that someone was holding. I could only see their legs as they were behind the tree. There was a black bag on the floor next to them, and then they came out from behind the tree and looked at me. It was a man, a stranger, not Santa. He saw me and put his finger to his lips. He whispered, "Yes, I'm Santa." But I knew he was lying. He didn't look like the Santa I knew. He looked scary and mean. I screamed for my mom and dad as loud as I could. A man panicked and ran to the front door. He left the bag behind, full of our presents and ornament. I don't remember if he locked the door or not. I just remember him running away and my parents coming down the stairs. They saw me crying and the bag on the floor. They knew someone had broken in and tried to steal our stuff. They were shocked and angry. My dad told me he ran outside in his slippers, looking for the man. He wanted to catch him and make him pay. He said the man had taken half of the ornaments from the tree. Some of them were very old and special to us. How could someone do such a horrible thing? My dad said the man had broken in through the back door using a crowbar. There were marks on the wood. We later found out that we were not the only ones who had been robbed that night. Another house nearby had also been hit by the same guy. It was on the news. He was a Christmas thief who preyed on innocent families. I don't remember much from when I was 6, but this is a memory that haunts me to this day. One weekend, I had the house to myself, and my girl Jenny came over to chill with me. It was around Christmas time, and we were feeling festive. Jenny wanted to watch some Christmas movies, so we got some food, drank some wine, and cuddled by the tree in the living room. We watched the Polar Express first, then we put on Elf. We ran out of wine, so I said I'd go to the liquor store nearby and get some more. It was a quick trip, no big deal. It was Saturday night, so they were open late. The same guy who always works there was there, and he started talking to me like he always does. While he was talking, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was Jenny. I cut him off and said, "Hold on," and I answered. Jenny sounded freaked out, saying she heard some noises from under the living room. That's where the crawl space is. I told her not to worry. There's nothing down there. She asked me to stay on the phone with her until I got back, so I did. I walked back home in 5 minutes, and Jenny was still on the couch. She had paused the movie and said she was listening for noises. I asked her if she heard anything else, and she said no. She wondered if there was an animal down there. I told her that couldn't be because there's no way for anything to get in. I popped open the wine bottle, and we kept watching the movie. But then, we both heard a loud thump from under us. From the crawl space, I looked at Jenny, and she looked at me. She was right. There was something down there. I said, "Oh crap, maybe there is an animal down there." We paused the movie again, and I went to the closet where the attic door was. I took the flashlight from the shelf and went down to the crawl space. I stayed by the door and just looked around. There were boxes everywhere, so anything could have been hiding. It smelled like pee in there, which meant there was something down there. I didn't know what to do. I'm not a pro at this. I texted my parents in the group chat and told my dad to call pest control tomorrow. Then, as I was going back up the stairs, I heard something from the other side of the crawl space. I couldn't tell what it was, but something moved. I freaked out and thought some animal was gonna attack me, so I ran up the stairs and slammed the door. There was nothing else we could do now, so we just went back to the living room and finished the movie. After Elf was over, we went to my room and fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with a full bladder and a pounding headache. I got out of bed and opened my bedroom door and saw a dark figure at the end of the hall. I almost freaked out, but I shut the door quietly and locked it. I heard footsteps coming closer, and then the doorknob twisted, and someone said, "Hello," in a creepy voice. That's when Jenny started to scream. She woke up when I got up, and she heard the voice too. I wanted to calm her down, but I was terrified myself. I heard footsteps going away from the door, and I called 911. Waiting for the cops was the longest time of my life. When they got here, there was no one else in the house. Whoever it was, they were gone. The pee smell in the crawl space was real. There was a puddle of their pee on the floor. That was messed up, because that meant they had been down there for a while. They were probably a homeless person. That didn't make it any less scary. My family didn't believe me at first. I always lock the door now.